and all is still go as we monitor our status for it. Good luck and Godspeed.
Have you ever had a premonition, a feeling that something dreadful was about to happen?
No, Mother, I have not been drinking.
Do you happen to have a pair of birds that are just friendly?
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I have to go back into the past once more, just once more.
This is HitchPod, a podcast counting down the 20 best movies of the wonderful 20th century director, Alfred Hitchcock. I'm Kat Jones, with me is Dan Libke, and in this episode we're comparing the 8th best Hitchcock movie, Notorious, with the movie that the Oscars thought was the best one from that year, and that was called The Best Years of Our Lives.
The Best Years of Our Lives.
And that, of course, was from 1946.
Yes.
So we're just post-war here, but before we get into the movie, we're going to go into the cryptic clue.
Yes, this is for the 7th best movie, which will be coming up next month.
We'll be rewatching that one very soon, and we just like cryptic crosswords.
We do.
So the cryptic style clue to the 7th best movie is what we're going to give you now, so you can see if you can work it out before the end of this episode, or indeed straight away.
Yes.
Here's the clue. In this movie, does Sean Connery call his boss to renew his licence? And the letters are 4136.
Yes, there you go.
I'm sure you probably know that.
Work that out.
Straight
ponder
away.
on that a little bit.
Ponder on that.
Yes. So let's get into The Best Years of Our Lives, which, as you mentioned, is a 1946 movie. Has an IMDb score of 8.1 out of 10, a Rotten Tomatoes score of 97%, and a Metacritic score of 93%, which is universal acclaim. And do you know how universal this acclaim is?
Did you get a Bosley Crowther?
I got a Bosley loved it. Bosley
loved it.
Bosley thought it was incredible.
Well, that it's universal.
Here's a quote from Bosley.
Oh.
It is seldom that there comes a motion picture which can be wholly and enthusiastically endorsed, not only as superlative entertainment, but as food for quiet and humanising thought. So that's very un-Bosley-like.
Yeah.
He's very, very positive about this
Bosley
one.
likes quiet, character-driven
He does, yes.
movies.
As did the Academy.
We've got all these ratings here. We know it won some awards.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to double blind people watching this movie, not knowing it won an award,
Yep.
and then see what they're going to rate it as.
Yeah.
That's what I would like.
Oh, you're going to be sorely disappointed, I think. I don't think you're going to be getting
There
that.
must be someone out there listening to this podcast who can do some research of this type. What kind of rating would you give a movie if you didn't know it won?
It was an Oscar winner.
Anyway, what did it win?
It won 7 Oscars. So obviously the Best Picture, which is why we're talking about it now, but also got Best Actor for Frederick March, Best Supporting Actor for Harold Russell, Best Director for William Wyler, Best Screenplay for Robert E. Sherwood, and some more minor ones, Best Sound, Best Editing, and Best Music. And there was also an 8th Oscar, which we'll get to a little bit later.
As if
in
it
the
didn't win
episode.
enough already.
Yes.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it did deserve some Oscars.
It
was pretty good.
It's a good movie.
Is it easy to find it? Because, these old movies, black and white, very difficult to find sometimes.
Yeah, this one's reasonably easy. If you've got an Amazon Prime account in either the UK, the US, or Australia, you can stream it. Didn't check every single country.
That's good.
Presumably Amazon Prime streaming it everywhere. Can't imagine that they've just limited it to those 3 countries.
And I didn't really know some of these actors in it, except for Teresa Wright, who played Peggy, because we saw her in Shadow of a Doubt, right?
Yes.
She played young Charlie. She was a little bit older in this one, but she still looks pretty young.
Yeah, playing a similar role. But I can give you some trivia about some of these actors. So we've got Dana Andrews. He plays Fred. And I think my favourite trivia fact about Dana Andrews is that he played a character named Ted Stryker in the movie 0 Hour. Now,
Isn't Ted Stryker from Flying High?
Exactly. If that name sounds familiar, it is the name of the protagonist in Flying High, or Airplane, as it's known everywhere other than Australia.
Oh my God.
And the reason for that is because the movie Airplane or Flying High has the exact same plot as 0 Hour. It is the same movie, just with all the jokes added.
Yes.
So that's the gimmick to it.
It was the main movie that they were parodying.
Yes. Yeah. So there you go. So
I have seen that movie, and it would be great to watch it again because it's dead serious.
Yeah.
It's very dull.
Yep. Yes. So there you go. So he's the original Ted Stryker. He's the unfunny Ted Stryker.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I can't even remember which character was Fred in this movie. I've already forgotten who was who.
Fred is kind of the main one. We'll get to.
Oh, the slightly handsome one, the soda guy.
Slightly handsome one.
Okay.
So then we got Frederick March. He plays Al, and Al's the slightly older one, the former banker. And he was also a Jekyll in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and he was also a Willy Loman in A Death of a Salesman. So he's got got some other previous roles. An actor who didn't have any previous roles was Harold Russell. He plays Homer. He's the third of the soldiers returning. As you mentioned, Teresa Wright played Peggy. And top of the bill was Myrna Loy, who played Millie, which is Al's wife. And she was top of the bill because she was pretty much the most famous person in the cast at the time. Okay, so the screenplay for this one was written by Robert E. Sherwood, who has also got a Hitchcock relationship. He wrote the Rebecca screenplay, so he's a useful screenplay writer. And he wrote this one based on a novella called Glory for Me by McKinley Cantor.
And the synopsis?
And the synopsis of this one is 3 World War II veterans, 2 of them traumatised or disabled, return home to the American Midwest to discover that they and their families have been irreparably changed. This was directed by William Wyler, who had previously won a Best Director Oscar for Mrs. Miniver, and he would go on to win another one, spoiler alert, for Ben-Hur.
I wonder if we'll get to watch Mrs. Miniver. I guess it depends which...
Depends what year that was in.
Which year that is, yeah.
Yes. And this is a drama / romance / war movie. Not much war in it, but it's war adjacent.
And I think it's very war.
I guess. There's no actual fighting though. So, yeah, that's definitely tangential to war.
I think it's the topics are mostly war.
That is true,
right?
yeah.
So,
yes. Yeah, well, it's classified as a war movie. I think that's fair enough. The tagline, this is all caps. The screen's greatest love story is the best film this year from Hollywood. That's it.
No, that's a terrible tagline. Again, another placeholder that someone put in there. Who are they delegating these taglines to? Is it the most junior person in the whole place?
I don't know. The screen's greatest love story is the best film this year from Hollywood.
Anyway, hearing about other Oscar winners makes me think people who really love movies probably have listened to a bunch of other podcasts that go through all the Oscar winners in sequence.
Yeah, probably.
And maybe I'll seek some of those out and see what they think of all these movies we've watched.
I'm sure they love them.
Maybe not.
All right, so let's go through the plot of this movie. So we begin at the end of the war. The war's all over. We've got a whole heap of soldiers and sailors trying to get home. And we meet 3 of them who are all thrown onto the same flight because they're going back to more or less the same town. So this is Fred, who's Dana Andrews, Al, Frederick March, and Homer, who is Howard Russell. And
feels like they're waiting for a long time to get on a plane.
Yeah,
and we see this in real time.
We see a lot of things in real time, yes. It's this movie does not have sharp cuts. So of the 3 of these men, the most obviously damaged is Homer, who is missing his hands after a war injury. He instead has hooks for hands, and he's remarkably proficient in them. He's can do pretty much anything with these hooks. Which
is why we immediately went away and Googled, who is this guy and how did he get so good with his hooks? And it's because they are his real hands.
Yes, indeed, yes. So, yeah, as you mentioned, they wait for the plane in real time, then they fly home in pretty much real time. It takes a long time for them to get home. Everything in this movie takes a long time. And as they're flying home, they chat about all kinds of things. Homer in particular is worried that his girlfriend back home, who is literally the girl next door, he's worried that she won't love him because of his hooks. She's aware of them, but the reality may be confronting. They eventually land at the airport. They see a whole heap of decommissioned planes because, as we mentioned, the war is over and everything that was needed for the war is now superfluous. And this is capital S symbolism. This is very clear. So they all get dropped off at their various homes. Homer's girlfriend, Wilma, she seems okay with the hooks, but his mother is very upset at the sight of them. She kind of tries to hide how upset she is, but not particularly successfully. Then we follow Al. He gets dropped off and we learn that he lives in a fancy apartment with his wife, Millie. This is Myrna Loy. And he's got 2 kids, Peggy, this is Teresa Wright, and Rob, and Rob will soon disappear from the movie, but only after giving his dad a lecture on the radiation effects of Hiroshima.
That's right, he's never seen again,
He's pretty much not. He goes away. I've got some trivia about that a bit later. So Rob doesn't hang around. He's there for a good time, not a long time. Anyway, and finally we follow Fred, and he arrives home. He lives with his parents, and his wife also was living with his parents. I assume both he and his wife were living with his parents, but his wife has since moved out. Probably fair enough. You don't really want to live with your parents-in-law while your husband's off at war.
And they were sort of a wartime romance, right?
Yeah. I think they dated there was like a 4th date marriage just before he flew off to go to war. So anyway.
Back in the days where you weren't allowed to have sex with anyone unless you were married. So a lot of people did this.
Exactly. Yes. Anyway, Fred can't find his wife anywhere. He tries to track her down at her apartment. She's not there. So So we cut back to Al. He takes Millie and Peggy out clubbing because the son's already disappeared, so he's not involved in this clubbing. Al's a bit of a drunk. He likes his alcohol, and he gets hammered pretty much while he's out clubbing. But he does bump into Homer and Fred, and as we mentioned, Fred can't find his wife, so they all get hammered instead. Fred gets sufficiently drunk that he starts hitting on Peggy, and he still can't find his wife, so eventually he decides, all right, Millie and Peggy say, we'll take you back to our apartment and you can sleep things off there. And this all takes forever as well. They get home, they undress, they get ready for bed. It's all very, very lengthy.
And at this point, you might be confusing, which one's the mother? Is it Millie or Peggy? Because they look almost identically aged.
Yes.
But,
Yes. Anyway, the next morning they all wake up a little bit hungover, but it's time for them to go about getting some jobs. No time to rest after your war duties. It's time to get back into civilian life.
I think the point there is that all the women have jobs.
Yes. And the men have to go back to theirs. And this is where I dozed off a bit for about 15 minutes, just 15 minutes or so. So if I'm a bit hazy here,
I did not doze off.
So Al goes back to his bank job. He gets a slightly better job at the bank somehow.
Yeah, you missed this.
I missed this.
He gets a promotion because he went to war.
Yep.
But actually, he had a very junior rank in the war. He was very senior ranked at home.
Mm-hmm.
He did a great job in the bank,
Yep.
but a very junior ranking at home. But nevertheless, he gets a promotion because he's a war hero, effectively.
And Fred is kind of the reverse. Fred was a officer with all kinds of duties in the war, but
and lots of medals and lots of decoration. And
but now that he's back, he's not going to get as many good jobs. He's also found his wife. His wife turned out she'd made a career as a nightclub dancer of some kind.
a nightclub dancer.
Yeah. Yes. So anyway, she decides, all right, I'm going to quit that job. I'll go back to being a housewife. And she realizes this may have been a mistake because Fred's career options are severely limited.
Yeah, I think she lasts one day as a housewife.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just working in a shop before, and he goes back and he has to work in the shop again.
Yeah, it's like a chemist or a drugstore or something.
Yeah, department store, drugstore, they call it. Seems to sell a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's effectively the chemist warehouse version of that era.
Yes. Meanwhile, Homer just, I kind of was dozing at this point still. Homer was in the garage shooting a rifle for some reason, and all the young kids of the town were looking at him and gawping at him, and he got upset and smashed the window.
I mean, he should have really been, getting that rifle a long way away from those children. But anyway.
Yeah. And that's all. Wilma also comes in and reassures him that she still loves him, but he doesn't really believe it. And then Homer just kind of steps out of the movie for a while. We don't see him for a very long stretch of time.
This happens repeatedly.
Yeah.
That the main characters sort of swap parts.
Yeah.
Yeah, which we'll talk about a bit later.
Yeah. So Peggy pops into the store where Fred now works, and he decides, they both decide, let's go to lunch during the lunch break. And at the end of their little lunch date, he kisses her, and that causes some romantic tension. Al, meanwhile, he has to give a speech in front of some of his bosses, and he rambles on drunkenly with that speech. And he's also made some kind of loan approval of which they don't approve, so he's not fitting back in quite as well as he might have been. And Peggy, after the kiss from Fred, she goes back to her parents and she says, I'm in love with Fred, but she also acknowledges that her love for him is stupid. So she's called up his wife to organise a double date so that she could see Fred and his wife together and realise that her feelings are inappropriate and maybe that will kill them. Except when they go out on this double date, it becomes very clear that Fred and his wife aren't in love at all. Whatever attraction they had on those 4 dates before he went to war, that's long since dissipated. So Peggy now changes her mind. She declares that instead she's going to break up the marriage so that she can be with Fred, because the movie is now a full-on soap opera with these characters.
And it's just so bizarre that she's declaring all of this to her parents.
Yes.
But anyway.
Yes. But there's a reason for her, plot-wise, declaring to her parents, because Al now knows about it. He's not having any of this nonsense. He meets up with Fred and says, you can't see Peggy anymore. You're never going to be together. Go back to your wife. Sort that out properly. So Fred gets up and he decides he's going to ring Peggy, call the whole thing off. And while that happens, Homer returns to the movie. He shows up in the bar. He plays some piano. But then he gets upset because Fred, who is otherwise occupied breaking up with Peggy over the phone, doesn't acknowledge Homer. So he follows Fred to the drugstore where Fred works. Then they bump into a random dude who tells Homer that the whole war was pointless. He lost his hands for nothing. The US was fighting on the wrong side of the war. This guy's a bit of a dick. And it all escalates into a fight, and Fred is eventually fired for punching this customer out. So now it's time to follow Homer home and resolve his plot. He shows Wilma his kind of nighttime routine, how he takes his hands off before he goes to bed, his hooks off. She declares she still loves him, and that pretty much wraps that story up. Fred, meanwhile, he goes home. He arrives home to find a strange man with his wife. And she says, "No, I want a divorce. I've had enough of you." Fred says, "Fine." He decides he's going to leave town. He goes to the airport, says, I'll just take whatever the next plane is. I don't really care where I go.
And this is where the slow plane ticket thing pays off because, again, it's very difficult for him to get a flight on a plane. Yep. So it all comes full circle.
Yes, and he's kind of overcome by nostalgia and symbolism for the discarded planes at the airport. He sees them and he goes over to one of them and climbs in the front of the plane, remembers how he was a bombardier, and is then given a job, which is good news for him. And then we cut to Homer's wedding day. He's getting married to Wilma. They're going to be very happy. Fred and Peggy catch up at the wedding. They kiss. They're going to be happy. And Al, I think, just has another drink and he's going to be more or less happy as well. And I think that's the end of the movie. So, yeah. What did you think of this one?
Well, we got a lot for our money, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
It was very long. Originally would have had probably 2 intervals, I would say.
Yeah, it's long, yeah.
Anyway, it felt like it hadn't been tightly enough edited on one hand. On another hand, it felt like a new style of movie. So maybe that was one of the reasons why people liked it.
Yeah, it was incredibly leisurely paced. Like the scenes were... The whole movie was about 3 hours, and I honestly think you could have still the exact same, like the entire plot, and you could still cut it down to an hour and a half, like just by chopping needless, walking around the room or whatever, pondering. I mean, it wasn't a particularly plot-based movie though.
No, and maybe that was part of the point that, the wartime stuff would have been very fast-paced. Everything was happening very fast. They got married quickly. Yes. They went away very quickly.
Action
scenes, and now the whole point of this being post-war and everything slows right down.
Yes.
Can't get a job. You have to go to your job. It's boring. That's part of the point of it, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. It just doesn't necessarily make for the most riveting viewing experience.
No,
I get the point.
You can definitely fall asleep and you didn't really miss anything. I mean, it's a very character-driven movie. And the points were the 3 guys obviously having trouble fitting back in and then everyone at home likewise having a bit of trouble fitting back in with them.
Yeah. I mean, I think overall I quite liked it. I certainly would have liked it if it was half the length with a whole heap of sharper editing. I think I would have quite enjoyed it. I think there were a whole heap of interesting ideas in there.
There were some good metaphors in there, some good symbolism in there. There was a couple of moments, like there was a moment where there was a plane set loose into in the drugstore and causing a little bit of damage. And the way that different people reacted to the damage was really interesting. Some people were horrified by it and other people just went, "Oh, this is the least of it. You should have been there when we were in wherever, overseas." I thought that was really interesting. The fact that was a plane as well, I thought that was really interesting, a toy plane. And the hooks, the guy with the hooks being a metaphor for everyone coming home from the war with some kind of injury, whether it was visible or not. I think that was really interesting as well.
I found the whole thing quite thought-provoking when I was awake watching it.
Yeah. And afterwards, it does stick in your mind a little.
I mean, it is hard to imagine, particularly for Fred, for example, like this dude had this position of great authority in the war and he comes back and he just has to do this menial job.
Very common. This was very common.
But I'd never really thought about that aspect of, I mean, what a culture shock that must have been to come back up, particularly like after war where you're fighting and killing people and then you're just back in seemingly normal everyday life.
And they gave him the most menial job they possibly could. Like he was just making milkshakes in this drugstore. It was a very lowly kind of job that he probably would have been, and people he'd left behind were promoted ahead of him. So all of that was covered as well.
Yeah. So and I think the store that he worked at that had been sold to some
new
owner. So he had no reputation, and they were just like, I don't care who you are. I don't really know who you are. All your skills are meaningless to us. So
At the very end, my favourite scene was that scene at the very end where he's in the graveyard for dead warplanes, and there were thousands of them there, and they all had something missing. That was just fabulous. That was really incredible. It was really creepy. It's worth watching the movie just for that scene at the end where he walks and walks and walks, and he sees every one of them has something missing, but they're they're all lined up, they're all the same, but yet they're all different.
Yeah.
It was really clever.
Yeah.
And then hopping into one of those planes, and that was a great moment.
Yeah, yeah, and I've been aware that the women had to do all the jobs while the men were away at war during the war, and then when they came back, there was the big culture shift there. But this kind of did bring it home a little bit, but particularly with Fred's wife, who she found a way to make a decent income, and suddenly
she'd done quite well without him. She only knew him for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people in that situation.
And now she's expected to just go back to a housewife for this guy who's not earning any money or barely any money.
Yeah.
Very strange.
Yeah.
Very it was very thought-provoking.
And the fact that this was made instantly, as soon as the war was over, it probably helped a lot of people understand those feelings if they hadn't thought about them, if people were being a bit superficial about it.
Yeah.
These were very fresh ideas, and of course that was one of the reasons why it was almost not made, but very, very fresh in everyone's mind. This is 1946. Incredible.
Yeah, yeah. Still, 3 hours is a long time for a movie where there's not a lot of plot.
Yep.
So I guess the main piece of trivia about this movie was that Harold Russell became the only actor to ever win 2 Oscars for the same role. So he's the guy with the hooks for his hands. He had lost his hands. I think it was in a training accident. Some kind of bomb went off while they were practicing defusing it or something, which is horrific. And he hadn't really acted before, so he was thought to be kind of a long shot to win Best Supporting Actor. So the Academy said, we'll give you this honorary award for, quote, bringing hope and courage to his fellow veterans through his appearance. And then they gave him this award. Good work, well done. And he actually won the Best Supporting Actor.
No, I'm not surprised. He was a really good actor.
Really good, yeah.
He wasn't the worst actor in this, or he was actually a great actor, and hopefully he probably did go on. And
I don't think he'd had too many. He had a few other roles after this, but not too many more. But yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not surprised that he won. It was obviously something that he was very good at.
Yeah, yep. So what about some? How was this movie made?
Well, this was there were a lot of people after the war wanting to make movies about veterans. So Samuel Goldwyn was one of them, and he hired McKinley Canfor to write the screenplay. And this was published in novella form, I think.
Yeah, in blank verse novella form.
And what
I
is
don't
blank
know what
verse?
blank verse, like that's kind of poetry. That's a very, very strange idea.
And anyway, that's but was adapted into the screenplay.
Yep.
And of course, the director had also had some war experience. So again,
I think this was when he was making Memphis Belle in 1944. I think he went along on some flights. I'm not sure he actually was part of the fighting, but he was it was enough to inspire him to make the movie as authentic as possible.
Yeah, right. Interesting. And so the dude who was new to acting with the hooks for hands, he was seen in an army training film about the rehabilitation of wounded servicemen. So they obviously plucked him out because he had some acting talent there.
Yeah, but no actual
training?
Yeah. So Goldman, the producer, he said, "I'll get you some acting classes." And Weiler, the director, was furious about this.
Right.
He said, "I don't want him to have acting classes. I like him. I like him as he is. He's got this kind of natural charm."
Yeah.
And so much so, like in the final scenes, you can actually see he messes up some of the lines from the wedding.
Yep.
And Weiler just kept it in. So it's like, no, people mess up their lines at their wedding. That's
just
fine.
as well, because we saw every bloody line of that wedding, and they were definitely married by the end of it.
Yep.
Like we did, there was no cutting away so that those two actors were not married. They were.
Those
went through
actors
the whole
are now
wedding.
married. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. They also, as we mentioned, got Myrna Loy to play Millie. She was the biggest name in the cast, so she was given top billing. And the character's a pretty minor role. She's
And I'd never seen her before, but she was obviously famous at the time. So what about the son? What happened to him?
So the story of the son. So this is Rob, the one who is there when Al arrives home and then never seen again. He was supposed to be in more scenes, but the actor's contract ran out during filming, and Goldman just said, I don't want to pay this guy anymore. So they just cut him out of the rest of the movie.
Okay. I just assumed because he was under the age of 18, we never saw him again because they were mostly in nightclubs after that.
Yeah.
Anyway, this was a very big success, wasn't it, this movie? And the the producers didn't think it was going to be. So I think this is really interesting when things are unexpectedly more successful.
Yeah. So, it's successful on every measure.
Box office.
Critical, box office. Like, it was the highest grossing film of 1946.
Yeah.
Like, for movies before 1950, it like ranks right up there with, Gone with the Wind and those kinds of ones. It hasn't been re-released as often as those ones, so it fell away afterwards. But at the time, it was as big.
Yeah. And I think we had a long talk about this as we were watching it, how it really did seem like a TV show. So I think this is early days on realising what people wanted, and they want that continuity of storyline that goes on and on and on a little bit, and that jumping between storylines. It was very similar to the later soap operas or, TV shows that were made.
Serialised TV shows. Yeah. I felt like we'd get a Homer half-hour episode, then like he's off for the next bit, and now we're looking in at Fred and Peggy. How's their relationship going? That's fine. And then we cut away to someone else. Al's story at the bank. How's that going?
So these directors and producers were just ahead of their time. They were already envisaging this type of entertainment.
Yeah.
That then they had to wait 10, 15 years before there was a viable vehicle
medium,
for it. Yeah. So they couldn't really do this kind of thing in a big screen format. So, I think that's really interesting.
The movie, got loads of acclaim, as we mentioned, for how realistic it was. And particularly in the aftermath of like a lot of borderline propaganda movies about, soldiers go America. We've got our heroes have got to win the war, which is fair enough. In a war, you're going to support your troops. But kind of to see the aftermath of it, it was confronting and eye-opening at the time. Still quite confronting this far away.
Yeah.
So what are some lines from this particular movie?
Oh, there's not much in the way of humorous lines. Fair enough. It's a very serious movie.
We do have one where Fred first sees Al's apartment as they're being dropped off. Fred says, some barracks you got here. Hey, what are you, a retired bootlegger? And Al replies, nothing as dignified as that. I'm a banker. So there you go.
And on the double date, I think Peggy's date, Woody, says, talking about marriages, all marriages don't have to be like that one. Peggy says, which one? Woody says, your friends, Fred and Marie. And Peggy says, what's wrong with their marriage? And Woody says, nothing except one slight detail. They just don't like each other.
Yes.
So he's summed them up very quickly.
Big mistake from Woody, though. Woody was keen on Peggy, and Peggy's just said, well, you've still got a chance with Fred over there. So come on,
That's
Woody,
right.
sort yourself out, mate. And then, of course, Fred and Marie do break up, and Marie says, what are you going to do? Fred says, I'm going away. Marie says, where? As far away from Boone City as I can get. And Marie says, that's a good idea. You'll get a good job someplace else. There are drugstores everywhere. So sticking the knife in as he leaves.
Shocker. So when it comes to the Bechdel test, I think it passes.
I think it just scrapes through. I mean, we do have several named women. They do talk to one another quite a lot.
About men, but also
I
about
think
other
there's
things.
probably a few conversations, not particularly deep conversations about other things, but they're mostly concerned with their man.
Yeah.
Just a pass. What about technology? How could modern technology change this plot?
Well, I think they wouldn't have necessarily had to have all of the men, in the same town bumping into each other in nightclubs, right?
Yep.
They could have organised meetups and
get a WhatsApp group going.
There was a lot of coincidental bumpings into that had to happen back in that era.
Yeah, they sort of set that up because they set up Homer's uncle had a bar, which he mentioned on the flight home, one of the thousands of things he mentioned. So they all kind of knew that this was a bar. Maybe you were asleep at that
maybe I was
first
asleep.
flight. You fell asleep during the flight.
Yeah.
Yes. But you could have that sorted out. I did think that instead of, we had this fist fight that Fred got into with this kind of random troll, in-person troll who showed up. And a troll these days doesn't just show up in your to get a milkshake off.
No.
You meet your trolls online, so that
right.
would happen in social media. You'd get into an online argument there.
I'm
not sure he'd be sacked for it. That would depend whether he was silly enough to use his real name on social media.
He'd be silly enough to use his real name, and then he would get the sack for
he'd be Fred _ whatever the hell his surname was.
And he'd be doing it at work.
Yep.
And then he would lose his job that way. Yeah.
Anything else?
Well, I think that these days in war, people have their mobile phones with them and they're probably checking what's happening back home, right?
Yeah.
So these things aren't a surprise that Peggy's now got a job in the hospital and that Marie or whatever is now working in a brothel or whatever she was doing.
Yes.
And so, he would have...
He might have been aware that she didn't quite live with his parents anymore by the time he gets back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as tributes, homages and remakes, it was remade into a series of radio plays. There was also a 1975 made-for-TV movie called Returning Home, which
Different war?
Different war. This is the post-Vietnam War. This one starred a young Tom Selleck as Fred. So
But the same plot, but with different war.
pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
So-
I guess same plot. What plot?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only other reference I've got is both Neil Diamond and Richard Clapton released albums called The Best Years of Our Lives, which are presumably unrelated. So
That just goes to show what a terrible
That's
name
not a great
for a movie or an album.
yes, yeah, it's I kept on forgetting the name of it. I had to look it up 1,000 times.
Yeah. Definitely should have been a soap opera with multiple parts.
Well, the
Would have
days
gone
of
well.
our lives, the best years of our lives, it's not that far.
No,
not
that's
far,
right.
Far different. You get 365 episodes of Days of Our Lives, and now you're cooking. You're starting to get at
I
least
think
one year.
there were TV series that had this kind of theme. We just don't know what their names are.
Yeah, the Sullivans.
Yeah, the Sullivans. Yes.
Yes. What about the Oscar movie cinematic universe? I think that's pretty easy to tie.
We should be able to tie it into some. There's a lot of war going on, wasn't there?
Yeah.
There was someone flying planes.
Yeah, we've got
another one.
Yeah, we've got Michael Corleone from
Got
The Godfather.
Wings.
He flew planes. Yeah, he might have helped Laszlo and Ilsa escape. All kinds of things.
They are very.
I also
yes,
think Al
definitely.
might have gone drinking with Don from The Lost
Oh,
Weekend.
no doubt.
Yeah,
They
so-
definitely would have bumped into each other.
Yeah.
In fact, that guy from The Lost Weekend was probably the dude in the bar,
He could have been
in the drugstore saying
Yeah.
there was a problem
Yep.
with the war.
Yep,
I
could
think that
well
was
have
him.
been. There's no evidence that he wasn't, so let's say that was.
Hmm.
So let's go through the Hitchcock movie checklist as we get into the point where we're going to start comparing this to a Hitchcock movie.
And it feels like there's very very
not-
little that we can compare to a Hitchcock movie here. There's definitely no MacGuffin.
Yeah, there's
'Cause
no
there was
plot.
no plot.
No plot. Very hard to have a MacGuffin unless you
Yep.
have a plot.
Yeah, that's right.
We don't have a director cameo,
No.
but Weiler's daughters did play customers in some of the scenes at the
All right,
drugstore.
That's good. We got quite a few mothers. We had Homer's mother. We had Fred's mother, whose name was
Hortense.
Hortense. What a great name.
That's a great name. Someone needs to bring Hortense back.
Hortense. That
Yes.
a great name.
Yeah.
And then, of course,
Millie's the
Millie
main.
was the main mother.
But she's not really a mother,
No,
is
she was very young and hip, it felt like.
And she's more, her role is less a mother of Peggy as wife to Al.
That's
like
right.
The story is how
Peggy was a very grown-up daughter. They were more like friends.
and the son disappeared. So she's a terrible mother in that sense.
yeah. Just
The
lost
son could be a psycho. Maybe he's gone off to open a hotel somewhere.
Yeah, could
Who
be.
knows?
And
Yes.
I mean, the lead characters, are they on the run? No. Are they at a standstill? Not really.
Not
They're coming
really.
back, so I
Yeah.
don't think it works.
Yeah.
Characters with elements of good and bad. I mean, they're mostly pretty good. You can't make a returned soldier bad at all, can you?
Yeah, but they're not
not
capital
complex.
H heroes or
No.
capital V villains. They're just
People
messed up from the war. So
Yeah.
there's the smart young woman. I mean, Peggy is smartish.
Yes, she's quite over the top, really, just setting her sights on a married dude. I mean,
Yeah.
surely there's plenty of other... Well, maybe there's not. Maybe that's part of the point. Not many men available after
Yeah.
the war. Maybe she has to go after a married dude.
Well, she easily rebuffed the advances of Woody.
Yeah.
Woody shows up for this double date. He thinks, finally Peggy's going to come around. We're going to go on a date. We're going to hang out with this war hero and his wife. And at some
No.
point, I think he realizes, wait a sec, she has no interest in
No
me
interest
whatsoever.
in me at all.
Yes.
No, we don't have bumbling cops. We don't have a visual sex reference, do we? Do we have a visual sex reference?
Well, I guess the only thing, I mean, we do see Wilma go up into the
Oh,
bedroom with
yes.
Homer at the end.
there were quite a few metaphors
We
there.
watch him get ready for bed. I don't. I mean, they couldn't even show Al and Millie in the same bed together at this era. Like they had to show when Al wakes up after his big drunken night out. They show kind of Millie's head shape in the pillow. That's as
pillow.
close as they could get to having them sharing the same bed.
Yep.
But so they definitely
Yes,
can't show
you're right.
Wilma and Homer do anything more than what they do. But
But they obviously did, right?
I think so.
She took off he took off his hands. She helped him put on his pajamas.
Yeah.
That has to be a metaphor for
I
sex.
think so. I think
They're
so.
actually putting on a condom or something at that point.
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
What other tropes have we got though?
So we do have some other tropes via tvtropes.org. We've got break her heart to save her. So this is when Fred says, I got to break poor old Peggy's heart. I've just got to leave because otherwise she'll be pining over this married man instead of getting on with her life. Good work, Fred.
Yep.
We do have the derelict graveyard, which is the airplane graveyard.
Oh, yeah, that was good.
Yep.
Love that.
We got, my God, what have I done? Which is a great trope. This is Homer feeling kind of this immense guilt after he terrifies the poor children by busting the window. He's like, oh, what a fool I've been.
Yeah.
We've got the trope called no romantic resolution. And this kind of refers to the romance between Fred and Peggy, which kind of simmers along for most of the movie. It only really comes to a resolution with, as they say on the website, 45 seconds left in the movie.
Okay, that's good.
We've got removed from the picture.
It's the sun?
No. I think that would also work for the sun. This is a different version of being removed from the picture. This is where Fred looks at the photograph from the double date and he tears it in half. So he's just got the half with him and Peggy in it.
Yeah, that was great.
We've got the shell-shocked veteran, which is all three of them.
Yeah.
And the superstitious sailors. That's where sailors don't like, or soldiers as well in the era, don't like lighting 3 cigarettes on one match. That was a superstition from the war. Yeah, it's a famous superstition and it's based on the idea that the first, like when you light the match, the first one lets the soldier alerts the Germans that you've lit the match. When you light the second one, they can get a bead on you, and if you light the third one, they can shoot you. So it's an old timey bad luck thing. So you can't light 3 cigarettes with the same match. So. So when Homer, who can light cigarettes with his hooks, no problem. He lights the first 2 on the plane on the way home, and he asks the others, "You guys superstitious?" And they go, "Nah." And he says, "Well, I am." So then he lights another one to light his third one.
I completely missed that. I must have slept
You
through
must
that
have slept through
entire
the flight.
plane.
Yeah. You put your seat back. You had a doze.
Yep, definitely.
And finally, we've got waking up elsewhere, which is when Fred wakes up and he goes, "Where the hell am I?" Because he's gone out drinking and suddenly he's in Peggy's bed. Yes. Yep. So now we get to it. Notorious versus the best years of our lives. What did Notorious do wrong? How could it have stolen some of the best years of our lives Oscar juice?
Well, I mean, interestingly, they were both kind of post-war movies.
Yes.
So Notorious went the wrong way. Notorious followed the bad guys instead of following the good guys. So there's the first problem.
Yep, big mistake there. Hitchcock made the big mistake of putting far too much plot in Notorious. Like
Way too much plot.
Slow it all down, Hitch. Let's just wallow in the characters' lives as much as possible. We don't really need to have a plot. We can just,
This is just a post-war thing. Alicia coming to terms with her father being in jail. We need to see the father in jail for extended sequences before he died.
The entire trial.
Yeah. The entire trial. We needed to, slow it all down.
We need to ask Devlin, how do you feel about still having to deal with Nazis even though the war is over? You don't actually have to see him do it. We just have to, how do you feel about all this?
And how does Sebastian feel about now having to be a post-war Nazi? Blah.
Yeah. And I mean, there shouldn't be any Nazis in the movie at all. That's a bad plot move. The war's over. Academy doesn't want any Nazis in their movies.
No, that's right.
So big mistake there.
And, we can't have uranium in wine bottles either. That's far too much plot, too many MacGuffins for sure.
Yeah. So what do you have in wine bottles if you don't have uranium in there?
Well, they just drink wine, do they? Yeah.
I think so.
They just have wine problems,
I think
drinking
we
problems.
just study Sebastian's drinking problems rather than his uranium problems.
Yeah.
He's presumably got a lot of issues as well to deal with.
We do have the married couple being broken up by the person who wants to break them up. So that's interesting. You still have the same thing.
So lean into that. Lean into the soap opera-y elements of that.
Although, Cary Grant should have just told his parents that he was going to break up the marriage.
Yeah, we didn't see Cary Grant's parents.
We didn't. That's another mistake.
Big mistake, yeah.
Not enough parents in this movie. Yeah. Not enough people living with their parents.
Yes, he should have gone to his parents and said, "I'm going to break up these two."
Yeah.
And off he goes, yeah. So surely that's the only way that Hitchcock could have won an Oscar this year.
Definitely.
Get rid of all that plot, Hitch, you damn fool. So, where are we going to rank the best years of our lives against all the other Oscar movies we've watched?
So, I had a lot of trouble ranking this movie. I had a look at all the other Oscar movies that mostly I hated. And, I mean, some of them I liked. I mean, Casablanca's there right at the top of mine. I love Gaslight, love Rebecca. And Wings was a surprise.
Yep.
So they're my top 4. And I thought, where am I going to put best years of our lives? And then I thought, well, it has to be above The Godfather. So somewhere in the middle here.
Yep.
And I think I'm going to put it under... Wings. I think I'm just going to put it under Wings.
At 5.
At 5.
Okay.
I think it's going to be just out of my top 4.
Yep.
above, you can't take it with you, which I have trouble remembering. And I'm sure I'm going to have trouble
remembering. You can't
remembering
take it
this.
with you, all those wacky family
That's right.
doing wacky things.
They were a bit too wacky.
They were far too wacky. Well, I've got it in a similar spot. I've got it after Wings as well, but Wings is my 5th. So The Best Years of Our Lives comes 6th. So I've got The Godfather, Casablanca, Gaslight, Rebecca, Wings, and then The Best Years of Our Lives just ahead of Marty.
So that's interesting. Our top 5 or 6 are in the same order, except I've got The Godfather way down the list.
Yes.
But other than that, we're in the same order for those.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
So, yeah, we would have been useful on the Academy.
We would have been.
With our voting in
Yep.
sync.
So that's the end of our coverage of The Best Years of Our Lives. So let's work out what our next movie will be.
From the Cryptic Clue.
From the Cryptic Clue. So the 7th best Hitchcock movie, as voted on by our listeners.
So I'll read out the clue again. The cryptic clue was, in this movie, does Sean Connery call his boss to renew his license?
So it's obviously Marnie, right? No, he's not Marnie.
No, 4136.
Yes.
It's not Marnie. It's 4 words. What are they, Dan?
Well,
Explain it for
the
me.
answer is dial M for murder,
Yes.
which I think is the only thing that could possibly fit 4136. So this one's a kind of less common style of cryptic crossword clue. It's a question mark clue. So usually in cryptic crosswords, you have 2 parts to a clue. One's a normal clue and one's a bit of wordplay. And most of the time for the cryptic clues we've given, the clue is effectively, it's a Hitchcock movie, the normal one, and then the other one's the wordplay. But for a question mark clue, the entire clue is meant to be interpreted in a non-obvious way. So in this case, the idea is that Sean Connery is calling his boss to renew his license, and that's a reference to his run as James Bond, of course, because James Bond's boss is M, and he had a license to kill. So if he's calling his boss to renew that license, he is dialing M for murder.
And that is, I reckon, the best clue you've ever come up with, Dan. That's a fantastic clue.
Yes.
And also a fantastic movie. We're going to have a lot of fun watching this movie. It's a rewatch of Dial M for Murder from 1954. More Grace Kelly.
More Grace Kelly, now with Ray Milland. And this was originally my 5th ranked Hitchcock movie.
I didn't love it so much. It's number 12 for me, but it's still in my top 12.
Yes.
So will our opinions change on the rewatch, I wonder?
Yes, well, we'll let you know next month. So if you have any questions or feedback on Dial In for Murder, you can email them to us at feedback@hitchpodonline.com, and we will do our best to answer them in the next episode.
So we'll see you next month. Thank you for listening to HitchPod. Please come and talk to us on Twitter at HitchPod Tweets or on Facebook by searching for HitchPod. And you can also email us directly at feedback@hitchpodonline.com. And if you want more Hitchcock content, please consider becoming a HitchPod supporter. Just go to patreon.com/HitchPod. And for as little as $2 a month, you can get access to our Season 1 coverage of every single Hitchcock movie, as well as bonus episodes on Hitchcock-esque movies. Invitations also to watch live rewatches and much, much more.